Do you think you're clever? If you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, I would hope so. But this is a question that has previously been asked at an Oxbridge interview. But why? Yes, I'm back with more weird Oxbridge interview questions that could catch you off guard if you don't know how to approach them. In this video, we'll analyse 3 more past interview questions to determine exactly what they're assessing and how to effectively respond to them. Let's get started. For full advice on Oxbridge interviews, including plenty of practice questions and student experiences, be sure to download the big book of Oxbridge applications today for free. If you missed our first video on weird Oxbridge interview questions, be sure to check that out to get a better understanding of the types of questions you can expect from an Oxbridge interview, and why these weird ones are sometimes asked. But with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the strangest interview questions asked at Oxford and Cambridge. Do you believe in fairies at the end of the garden? We're starting off strong with this one, as it's not only a weird scenario, but it's also pretty vague. This is another fantastical question like the ant one that we discussed in the last video, but this one is even stranger, as it's also a bit vague as to what they're even asking. What does fairies at the end of the garden mean? Are they specific fairies or a general concept? That's down to you to decide. The bizarre nature of this question might immediately throw you off, but you need to make sure you don't panic. This question was once asked in an engineering interview, with the intention of forcing the candidate to take this ridiculous question and place it in a practical setting. For example, believing doesn't mean anything without proof in terms of mathematics. You would therefore be willing to believe in them if someone showed you proof. It's the dissection of the question that is important. If you wanted to take things a step further, you could explain how you would go about acquiring proof, potentially setting up cameras, placing out nectar as bait, things like this. The question you may be asked will likely be different, but the principle is always the same. Run with it and see where your train of thought takes you. How would you try and win a game of Monopoly? This is a more realistic but still fairly strange question to get, though it makes more sense if you consider that this was asked at a Cambridge economics interview. Although the mechanics of Monopoly are far from realistic, the principles behind how someone plays could still offer an insight into how they view the economy and land ownership, 2 highly relevant topics to the subject. Being asked about Monopoly does seem slightly less serious, but it is still clearly grounded in economic theory and should form the basis for your answer. If you happen to be unfamiliar with Monopoly or are not clear on the best way to win it, then make sure you ask for clarification. The Cambridge student who was asked this question gave a very detailed response, which you can pause here to read. But let's think about some of the key tips for answering a question like this. Firstly, make sure to emphasise that you understand the game has a large element of chance involved. Despite many factors being dependent on dice rolls, there are still plenty of ways you can build a strategy to win. So it's important that you acknowledge that your fortunes could always be reversed in a single turn, and perhaps offer a plan for how to protect yourself from this. Secondly, your strategy doesn't have to be the definitively correct one. You're not expected to be a master of Monopoly, so explain the moves that you would make in the game and justify them with both the game's logic and real-world economics. This is easier said than done, but it's not as challenging as you may think once you have a plan in mind. In comparison, a poor response wouldn't take this question seriously and treat it more as a joke. You need to make sure that you're still treating it with care and using it as an opportunity to show your economics knowledge and relate concepts to the specific question. Lastly, let's look at the question we asked at the start of the video. Do you think you're clever? This may feel mildly threatening to you, and a question like this can make candidates think that the Oxbridge interview questions are a test of personality, which they aren't. Should you be honest, modest, or confident? Well, these aren't necessarily the best ways to go about it. The first thing to note is that anyone who has gotten this far in the process is considered reasonably clever by the admissions tutors. The work you've done up to now proves that you probably have the academic capabilities to do well at these universities. So this question is all about your reaction to something very direct, and coming off defensive is probably the worst reaction you could have. This isn't an insult, it's just a question. One way to approach this question is to answer it in relation to the subject. Your admissions tutors likely won't be as interested in how well you perform in mathematics if you're applying for an English degree, so consider your strengths in your subject and link those to your cleverness. However, a response like this could, again, fall into the trap of defensiveness. The admissions tutors know that you're good at your subject. What they want to know is if you would be a good Oxbridge student. Someone who can work independently, think creatively, and put their all into everything they do. The ideal Oxbridge student isn't just good at their subject, they also have general intelligence that allows them to navigate a wide variety of questions and problems. These types of skills are typically what are being tested with these types of weird interview questions, so this is basically the most direct way of testing you. Before we finish, let's recap our essential tips for taking on these tricky questions. These questions can't be predicted, so don't try to guess them. Just be ready for something unusual and use these general tips to handle any odd question. Think out loud and explain your reasoning as you go, including why you interpret a question a certain way or how you'd approach solving it, even if your first thoughts aren't perfect. These don't test specific knowledge, so rely on what you actually know rather than guessing or inventing information. Engage with the admissions tutors instead of just talking at them. Ask questions if something isn't clear. Your answers won't be perfect or right, so have fun and be creative, as long as your reasoning is logical. It's important that you realise these questions are only a small part of your interview, so don't stress about them. Now that you've watched this video, you should have a good understanding of what could potentially come up in your interviews. So remember these tips and ensure they don't catch you out. If you haven't already, be sure to watch part 1 of our look at weird Oxbridge interview questions and check out our website to learn even more about Oxbridge interviews, including details on far more common questions that you should be prepared for. You can also download the Big Book of Oxbridge applications by clicking the link in the description, which covers everything you need to know about the application process. Subscribe for more on Oxbridge, and good luck with your interviews.